What's up, guys? This is Carter Thomas with Coin Mastery TV. Make sure you go and sign up for the email newsletter list. Go to coinmastery.com/invest. Put in your first name and your email address and join the crew. We are doing videos all about cryptocurrency, all about making better decisions, ultimately so that you can profit most from this massive opportunity that we have here. So, some great stuff today. Make sure you stick around to the end. Medium important announcement. Feel free, if you want to just skip everything and go there, you can. But today we're talking about a lot of news. There's not a whole lot of action happening in the markets right now. We're still kind of back in the no man's land, but I think that there are some macro forces that are worth noting, things that I'm definitely checking out. Some ICOs that I think will be a good indicator of future developments. Wanted to touch on Waltoncoin because I got more messages and emails about that I didn't mention that the last few days. So we're going to talk about that today. A book I'm reading, and then talk about a little bit about the news at the end. All good stuff. Bitcoin had quite an interesting move last night. If you didn't hear, I should just start here. Got the kind of weekly announcement of a new country shutting down, I shouldn't say shutting down, right? Regulating ICOs. And so South Korea came out and essentially doing what China did, which is that they're putting regulations on it with the intention of making sure that people are not getting scammed out of their money and XYZ, right? This is going to keep happening in different countries, in places like Russia, and then inevitably the United States. And so, as you all saw, there was everything on Twitter and Facebook, and everyone was just, oh my God, you see the news, blah, blah, blah. What was really interesting, or at least what I thought it was interesting, is that this is kind of the drop that we saw, right? So if you're listening, I'm just looking at the Bitcoin charts yesterday, and there was a big steep drop off right around, what was this, like last night, I guess. That's kind of when I think I saw the news right at the end of the day, and there was a bit of a sell-off. But what was really interesting, I think the thing that you guys should really that's important for you guys to note is that there was a much lower percentage of people that were really freaking out. Remember when this happened, we lost friggin' 40% of the market cap in Bitcoin. South Korea, which actually has more volume than China, like they're trading more Bitcoin volume. And you only had this little couple 100-point drop. So that goes to show you how much fear is already baked into the price. Now, that's not an official statement. I mean, no one knows for sure. But from a market sentiment, from a macro standpoint, this pullback leading up to where we are now at 4170 or whatever it may be, the fact that this news only really contributed to this little drop thus far, I mean, assuming it doesn't keep going down, that's a good sign, in my opinion. That means that this 40% thing already baked in a lot of the fear. And the people that caused that drop, which is sellers, all of you bad sellers out there, just kidding, they kind of learned their lesson. They know that, hey, this is not the end of the world. It comes back. So that when the South Korea news happened, they didn't panic sell. This is just a gross generalization of watching everyone and seeing what the overall market sentiment was. But two, and probably more importantly, is that the psychology of hearing that kind of headline, it isn't enough to induce action. Now, I mean, again, I don't know if this is going to, if we haven't seen the big effects of this yet, but I would be willing to bet that it's not going to tank it the way that the China news did, because I think that because this is so fresh, this South Korea news it just doesn't have the same impact. And that's why we didn't see as big of a drop. Not as many people sold, not as many people freaked out. And that's great. And I think that is a very, very good data point as I zoom out here to, let's say, the 4 hour on Bitcoin. That's a really good data point to show that as we get up here, the resiliency of the price is much stronger than it has been in times past. Now, the good news is that typically in those situations, you don't have the big sell-offs unless we see some sort of institutional problem, right? If we find out that Bitfinex and Tether have been colluding and a lot of the price support in Bitcoin has been fake, that's going to be a big issue. I have no idea if that's true or not. That's like a conspiracy theory that has been going around for a while now. That would be a big deal. But when you're looking at just pure fear indicators, there's not a whole lot like left on that list that's really going to get everybody in our community to sell. And that is a really, really important piece, because previously a lot of these mini crashes were all driven on fear. And if we're getting more and more resistant to that fear as holders, that means that the price has better support. Now, the good news is it won't go down as much. I guess the other good news is that the chances of it going up are also really good because the base has been set. The thinking forward 3 to 6 months, what this means to me as a market psychology lens is that tends to cause this thing to go parabolic. And while that's very exciting to think about, nothing can shock people into selling their Bitcoin. I shouldn't say nothing, like things still can happen. But if we are all less resistant to fear shocking us into selling it, the chances of this going parabolic go up significantly. But it also breeds a feeling of invincibility with holders. And this is when the psychology really starts to get interesting. This comes from just my own personal research. I've read a lot about bubbles and market psychology within bubbles, but this is also just my personal thesis on this particular market. And I could, who knows if I'm right or not, but in situations like this, when it gets harder and harder for people to make emotional decisions about selling, when things are going way, way up, that comes back the other way just as much into overconfidence, into the inability to know when it is okay, it is time to sell. You lose that objective rationale. So from a pure price standpoint, I personally think that this is a good thing. I think that this means that we've got a future ahead of us. If that means you should go buy some, that's your call. Like I said before, if I see a good dip, I'm going to go buy a dip. I don't see a good dip right now or a good opportunity, but that's what I'm waiting for. But I do think that the market is getting more resistant. That also means that I really believe that in the next, basically from now through January, if this thing does go parabolic, you're going to see more and more people that think that this is, that we're invincible. And, there's a whole set of, we'll cross that bridge. But that's what I'm seeing. That's what I think is really interesting about this. And I think that as you guys look at this is one of the most helpful things you can do is just listen on Facebook, listen on Twitter, look through the comments, look through the responses. What kind of language are people using? How much confidence, how much fear do they have? And once you see those sort of things manifesting themselves into the charts, right, the story in the charts, that's when you can start to have a sense of where we're going. You can never predict the future because you never know what's going to happen, but that's a very good indicator. So that's what I'm seeing. That's why I think it's we're entering into kind of potentially phase 3 of the 2017 Bitcoin world. All right. Another piece of news that was interesting, we touched on this yesterday in terms of countries, like what was it, Gibraltar, really kind of saying go, the ICOs are a go. Japan is starting to take the lead on, in my opinion, this is kind of like what happened with cannabis, where they're basically saying, look, the best, we're instead of trying to ban this and totally outlaw this, let's regulate this, make sure it's done correctly, and potentially profit off of this in some way down the road. That seems to be what Japan is doing. Japan also has a history of being ahead of the rest of the global economy, both in terms of how they enact policy and also how their economy performs. So if it does well, it typically leads the global economy in certain ways. And if it tanks, it tends to lead the global economy. So you can often see, once something happens in Japan, it tends to proliferate. Not as true now as it was in the last 50 years because Japan is not as much of a powerhouse as it used to be, but they still do command an enormous amount of money and influence in this business. So like we talked about yesterday, watching how governments start to react, because what's the natural, next step for South Korea and for China is, okay, so we regulated it. Now what? And then you see Japan coming out and saying, okay, well, we're going to, see if we can make sure that this is a safe and potentially profitable endeavor for everybody. So I think you're going to see more of this. I think that China and South Korea are going to come out with similar statements in the next month, potentially maybe 2 months, but I think sooner rather than later. And I think that this is a very good sign for new money to come into the markets. Similarly, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, if you don't know about the IMF and the World Bank, great thing to go Google. It's an important piece of the global macro structure in terms of World Bank is more about creating financial loans or brokering deals for early stage countries, third world countries. They're both controversial, whether or not they're good and or effective institutions, but they're powerful and they definitely have weight and merit in this world. So the IMF, the chief, this guy, I'm sorry, Christine, I misspoke there. Christine Lagarde she said something like, don't let Bitcoin, don't be an idiot about Bitcoin. Like, this is a real threat. It's not necessarily a big thing right now, but it could easily become a big thing. So it's on their radar that we're seeing a shift from the Jamie Dimon, like immediate dismissal, over to the people, from Morgan Stanley and from the IMF starting to say to themselves, listen, it's one thing to hate it and to be pissed off about it. It's another thing to put our head in the sand and be dumb about it. And so you're seeing more and more people having these attitudes. So if you start to see this, how it all connects, right? That's really where this starts to get interesting. So you see the price in the charts, right? From the micro level, which is us, our day-to-day decisions. You see in the charts that the fear is becoming more resistant to dropping the price. You're seeing new countries regulate ICOs, but that list is going to run out soon. You're then seeing countries start to go to the next step where they say, all right, well, let's see if we can make this a part of our economy in some way. And then you're also seeing the private sector saying, okay, well, we can't, maybe this is something legit as well. So like the whole arc of the macroeconomic system is very, very slowly, but very swift, I should say, slowly in the sense that they're not doing anything about it yet, but it's starting to shift. And when that turns into buying behavior on the actual markets, that's a different story. But for now, we're starting to see this shift. And this is how it all starts, is when attitudes, because this becomes a story that people will tell themselves inside the institutions and in the markets. So I think that this is all very, very good news. I think that this is probably going to lead to some really good price increases. Again, pending some sort of fundamental flaw with the Bitcoin markets. Like we find out that something is deeply wrong with how this has worked, which I think that's a long shot at this point, but who knows? So the good news is that all of this together is pointing to this going way up. The next challenge that brings is that this is when we all have to become much more aware and prepared for all cases, because it will not go parabolic forever. Right? It's going to go up, and then, it just can't keep going up straight. And this is all pointing to that it will go up very, very fast. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And that's why Coin Mastery is going to help you as best I can make those good decisions. A couple other things that I want to bring up, a little bit less on the global macro scale. The Kick ICO raised $100 million. I did not invest in this ICO, but what's interesting about this is that this was the first big ICO that was connected to an existing product and, or more importantly, user base. So Kick has they have like 100 million users or something. I don't know what's in, like maybe a couple 100 million users. It's a big messaging app. They have a platform. It's really big in Asia, and they are monetizing that audience. And the reason why this is important is because if this works, this is going to open up the floodgates for private businesses to do tokenized offerings. Maybe not an ICO, but it will prove the model, right? If Facebook tried to do this, like 6 or 7 years ago, something like that, where they tried to do credits, and especially for the gaming side when Farmville was huge on Facebook, and it flopped completely. Now you're starting to see companies like Kick, and I would bet companies like WeChat, which is massive. They're starting to do this as well and seeing if they can monetize social networks. The reason why this matters for you guys is that if this ends up working, you are going to start to see public companies tokenizing their audiences and tokenizing their businesses, and that opens up an enormous amount of potential new money and new investing opportunities, because then you can bundle those as index funds. Do you see what I'm saying? We can't really bundle index funds for currencies because they're also volatile, they're also crazy. If this works, and it works on proven privately owned or even publicly owned companies that have earnings reports, that have a securities backing, and with a completely separate marketplace that keeps the market stable, that you can hedge against, that's when you can start to bundle crypto into new sorts of asset management. So I know that that's connecting a lot of different ideas, but I think that watching this unfold is going to be very helpful, because one, you may be able to see new networks that launch this sort of thing, but two, it's going to open up private and public company money, which that's the other big piece, right? You have governments, you have banks, and you have private companies, private sector, I should say. And that is when things get really, really interesting. So keep an eye on that. I think it'll be a really good one to check out. Now, I want to talk quickly about Waltoncoin. I've had a lot of people hit me up about this. If you guys don't know, it's a Chinese company, and they recently got some news that I think they won a competition of sorts, which I think they won $1 million, something along those lines. I read through their website, their white paper, and they have a great team. They have a lot going for them. It's all written in Chinese, so brush up on your Mandarin. Just kidding. You can get the English translation of it. But it had an unbelievable run. I own a little bit of Waltoncoin, not enough that like I really, I should say, I bought a lot of Waltoncoin, and then I sold it at a profit, and then I kept the scalp. So it's like It's done well, but I'm not, I'm not cruising around on a Ferrari quite yet. But it's gone up gangbusters. And the reason I didn't bring this up is because if you look at this and you say, oh man, Waltoncoin went up like 500% or whatever it may be, like, so what? Like, what does that mean for you moving forward? What did you learn from that? How are you going to keep buying it? Should you buy it again? Like, what exactly drove that money? And I personally, I don't have a good explanation. I do not know why that one piece of news drove a 400 or 500% increase in a week. Like that, I honestly can't give you a good answer on that. But you are seeing a bit of a sell-off, people taking profits and all that goes up. So if anything, I'm going to wait for a dip. 66, I don't know, that's a pretty sharp dip. This was also a very sharp, steep increase. So maybe you'd zoom in and see where the last resistance level was on a smaller scale of Binance. But I don't know. I think that when everybody is hoping for that, to own that next Ethereum thing. Everyone's trying to find that thing that they buy in at 10 cents and it goes to $600. The Ant shares, the Stratus, everybody's trying to find that. And I think it's really easy to make a coin, to turn that coin into that thing, to fulfill that, to make that a reality. And when enough people are doing that, it fulfills that prophecy for enough people that you start to see it in the charts. And what I think you're going to find is that you're going to see fewer and fewer and fewer, if any, other coins that do have that sort of 40, 50, 100x return in a short period of time, right? In a matter of months. I mean, over 5 years, that's possible. But that's why I look at this and I'm personally just fascinated to see what happens after this big run up, because we don't see these kind of run ups very much anymore. And I think that it's important to keep an eye on this so that we can, if this does keep going up and it keeps going up, then maybe I eat my words on this. I mean, I'll profit from it, so I don't really care. But I think that that's the way I'm looking at this, is that do we still have the ability to defy the laws of market economics? Or are we getting to the point where it can't just have this parabolic growth forever? It has to follow the natural progression of markets, or not. Maybe we're still so early that it can still do that. But that's what I'm looking at for Waltoncoin. If it drops down back to any sort of resistance levels or gets support at previous resistance levels, maybe I'll take a look at it. But for now, I'm just going to kind of sit back and watch it. But if you do own a lot of Waltoncoin, congratulations. I hope that you have a great weekend. I hope you take a little bit of that profit, because you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. So that's that. Now I want to end this. Two quick things. The first, this is that book I mentioned yesterday. If you want to go check it out, it's called Your Money and Your Brain. I'm going to put a link for all this stuff in the YouTube channel. I would agree on the reviews, 4 out of 5 stars, maybe even 3.5 out of 5 stars. I do think if you don't know much about psychology, if you don't know much about behavioral psychology specifically, you'll love this book as it relates to investing. It's a little bit wordy. The guy talks a lot about, he goes into a lot of examples that kind of say the same thing, but I think that it's a good read from an investor, because he talks about it through as an investor, as a trader, really. So I would worth it, especially if it's only $10. What I learned. This is another great book. Now that I think about it, if you've never read this, I would definitely recommend checking this book out. It's called What I Learned Losing $1 Million. I'll put a link for this as well. This is one of the best books I ever read about investing and trading. That it's a little bit more cerebral, I should say, but it's awesome. I would totally recommend this book as well. So these two books, I'll put links in, especially for the weekend. I think you guys will really enjoy it. And we'll rock and roll from there. Now, the last thing, I was on a run this morning, and I was looking at the San Francisco Bridge. It was great. And I thought about two things. The first thing is kind of a bigger concept, which I don't really want to get too deep into it, but it's like, what exactly this is what we're like trying to do here. We're all so fired up. We're all trying to hit the moon or whatever it may be. And without getting like life coach on anyone, because that's not at all what I want to do. It's really powerful to define exactly why it is that you are in this business. I'll leave it at that. But I have found in my life, and I'm finding it now especially, is that if you lose sight of what you're doing you're going to get smoked big time in the markets. Like, you will just get destroyed. And you got to stay focused on what it is you really want. And it could be money, it can be a Lambo, it can be providing for your family, it can be leaving a job you hate, it can be for fun, it can be anything you want. But you got to be super clear about it, and you got to remind yourself often why you're in this. So I'll leave it at that. Everyone can do what you want. Second thing is that next week I am not going to put out these videos and podcasts. And the reason why is not because I don't love doing it, but I think I need to stop putting all my energy into this stuff for a couple of days to be able to start making better decisions about the markets, about Bitcoin, about altcoins, about trades. Because when I think about where I want to go, right, I want to make a ton of money specifically so that I can make a huge difference in the world. Like, I'm not going to go buy some yacht and mansion. I want to do it so that I can go, feed 100 million people or like clean water. Like, I want to do something good. And I'm not going to make that kind of money if I don't take a break to like clear my head and all that sort of thing. And so I'm still going to be around like on Twitter and everything, and I'll absolutely be back the week after that. But it's just running. It's beautiful here this time of year. There's a lot of amazing stuff, and all I'm thinking about is crypto, and that is not going to get me to the levels that I want to be at. And it's also not going to give you guys the consistent content and information at the level that I want to be at for you too. So next week, it'll be kind of sporadic. I might do something like a live stream just to say hi, but I'll be on Twitter. So let's go from there. And, so it goes. But I will definitely be back a week after that. It's just got to do it. Got to stay fresh and make sure that this thing is, I just want to capitalize. I just want to crush this thing so bad. And I also know that when I look back at my life, there is no correlation between effort and the amount of money I've made, but there is a very, very strong correlation between how good the decisions and the money I've made. And that's a slight difference, but a very important one. And without really good health, without really good focus, I can't make good decisions, and I don't think anyone can make good decisions. So it could take a little time to work on some projects I've been stoked about, listen to some music, and just chill. So with that, I hope you have a terrific weekend. Make sure you go on Twitter @CarterThomas. Follow me there for live updates and, thoughtful discussions, hopefully. I will see you guys next time. Peace out.